Blake's 7 has a great series arc. Not the one that was set up in the first season, and not a story arc that many would find particularly uplifting or even satisfying. But if we set aside the pitfalls of television production and look at the story it tells on its own merits, Blake's 7 captures the flow of history better than perhaps any other series, whether science fiction or historical drama, and speaks to something central about revolutionary movements regardless of their specific politics. Blake's 7 begins as a very British dystopia, with elements of 1984 and Brave New World blending into 1970s sci-fi style, more Logan's Run than Star Wars. It ends up going in some very different directions over the course of 4 seasons. Directions that are much more interesting if we look at them from an evolving story standpoint, rather than simply as the result of significant casting changes, new writers, and budgetary constraints. So low budget they couldn't afford an apostrophe, I'm told. We start with Raj Blake, uneasy about slipping out of the domed city and its watchful surveillance cameras to meet with people on the outside.
It's natural water. The stuff we get's been recycled 1,000 times, and it's dosed with suppressants.
But it turns out that Blake had previously been a prominent dissident leader. His movement was crushed, but rather than kill him, the regime subjected him to brainwashing and trotted him out to renounce the opposition and ask them to submit to the authorities. After which, even that memory was wiped and he was released, serving the Federation better as a disgraced schlub out in the world than simply disappearing and leaving questions.
They could have killed you, but that would have given the cause a martyr.
Naturally, this meeting is being surveilled, and the masked security forces wipe out the new resistance movement very quickly.
We claim our rights as citizens and demand to be treated as civil prisoners.
Important safety tip: Gandhi games only work on liberal enemies with a relatively free press. Totalitarians don't play that. Know your foe. Blake, the sole survivor, is again put on trial. Not for political crimes, because that sort of thing can stir up sympathy and lead to subversive activities. Instead, they concoct some minor-related deviancy, complete with brainwashed kids to serve as witnesses.
Assault on a minor, attempting to corrupt minors, moral deviation as...
Seriously, they implant false memories of abuse in 3 random kids. That's some sick shit. His lawyer starts to think it all looks a little fishy, but the secret police kill him, Blake is convicted, and in a very British fashion, is sentenced to life on a crappy prison colony on Cygnus Alpha.
Take a long look. That's the last you'll ever see of it.
No, I'm coming back.
Well, we'll get there. There will be spoilers for this show from the late 70s, so if you don't want to know the ending, this is the off-ramp. During his incarceration and transport to the prison planet, we are introduced to the first iteration of Blake's merry band. There's Villa, the cowardly thief, Jenna, a smuggler and pilot, Gan, the heavy, and Avon, a hacker before there was a word for it and thoroughly grousy fellow. I'll skip the play-by-play, point being they end up in possession of a ship, which they call the Liberator, and the series becomes a sort of sideways Star Trek with an episodic format involving the Liberator crew overcoming some local crisis or Federation plot with their combined set of criminal skills. But Blake, now with his recovered memories, is a revolutionary. He and Avon butt heads over Blake's insistence on fighting the good fight against the Federation when they could simply fly away or engage in some very lucrative criminal enterprise. The Liberator is run sort of like a pirate ship with a semi-democratic tension between the crew and a lot of debate about where to go.
That's what we're going to do.
A blow for freedom.
Yes, our freedom. For a clever man, you're not very bright. Deaf, dumb and blind, how are they going to catch us?
I'm sure Blake will manage it somehow.
It's not long before the Federation takes steps to deal with them. Servalon, Supreme Commander of Federation military forces through political connections.
My confidential assessment listed her as unfit for command, but I forgot how well connected she was.
Brings in Travis here to put Blake down.
Destroy Blake.
Depend on it.
Much of the season hinges on the very personal conflict between Blake and Travis. They have some history.
I thought he was dead. I was sure I'd killed him.
Meanwhile, the Liberator crew strikes a few blows against the corrupt and oppressive Federation. They pick up Callie, a telepath, bringing us to the promised 7. If we count Zen, the ship's computer.
You're not counting that machine as a member of the crew.
Whoa. What do you say to that, Zen?
Please state course and speed.
Very diplomatic.
At this point, we have a sense of where the show is heading. Freedom-loving rebels and endearing outlaws sticking it to the man while getting caught up in side quests along the way, with an expectation that at some point they're going to be instrumental in overthrowing the tyranny of the Federation. At the end of the season, they acquire another computer called ORAC that can allegedly predict the future. Get it? It shows them the destruction of the Liberator, but refuses to tell them any specifics surrounding the event. Later, it serves as a conduit for some trans-dimensional demon consciousness trying to move into our realm. ORAC is a bit troublesome at times.
Why won't you give us the background to that prediction?
Because that would invalidate the prediction.
Season 2 opens with the builders of the Liberator reclaiming their property and hauling Blake and company to a massive space station run by a Borgish matriarchy cosplaying as David Bowie, and delivering some rather on-the-nose allegory of what our crew is up against.
We serve the system. Its questions and orders are routed through me, but the words and thoughts are those of the system.
One gigantic system that totally governs the three worlds. Now there's no war, no famine, and no freedom. Yes, the system uses people.
We also get Second Travis. Very little of the original cast makes it to the end. Foreshadowing. One of the highlights in the developing story arc is their attempt to destroy Federation Control, a computer system on a heavily fortified site that serves as the power center for all the Federation's surveillance and control of galactic communications.
The administration established a computer complex to monitor information.
Many have tried to destroy it, but so far, all have failed. Blake and his intrepid comrades breach the inner sanctum and are on the cusp of victory.
Blake, there's nothing here.
But the whole Federation Control thing was a psyop to draw in revolutionaries.
You believed it, Blake. Like all the other fools before you.
They escape, but Gan is killed in the process. The first member of the Liberator crew to meet a bad end. And it's in this season that the moral grayness of Blake really comes to the fore. He's a fanatic, fixated on destroying the Federation. Not only does he take the crew into harm's way time and again, but he makes deals with the shadiest of groups so long as he thinks they can help him fight the Federation. He even works with a drug cartel.
Don't tell me you have a moral objection to using their organization to infiltrate Earth.
Of course not.
Though it turns out the cartel is actually run by the same people running the Federation.
It's quite logical. To have total control, you must control totally. Both sides of the law.
I mentioned Gary Webb for no reason at all.
Ironic, isn't it? We were hoping to use the Terra Nostra to attack the Federation, only to discover that it is already being used to support it.
And the last few episodes of the season build toward their move on Star 1. It's the same idea as Federation Control, but for real this time. Also, it controls a lot more than communications.
Climate control has gone disastrously wrong on all the frontier worlds.
That is some obsessive central planning. And it's where Blake finally has to confront what he's been doing this whole time.
We have to win. It's the only way I can be sure that I was right.
Meanwhile, Servalon is using the opportunity for a power grab.
Space Command no longer recognizes the authority of the President or of the Council.
But it's also established that the Federation may not be a militarized monstrosity just to be evil for its own sake. There's a massive defense net around the edge of the galaxy. A defense net directed outward.
A defense zone to keep mankind in, or something else out.
This opens up a lot of possibilities. I know my mind started racing with a web of implications and story directions that could follow. The season ends with a motley fleet of kit-bashed ships attacking from a neighboring galaxy. An intergalactic war has begun. And it happens very quickly and mostly off-screen. Season 3 starts with a brief space battle. We're told that Star 1 is destroyed and the Federation is left in shambles, though the alien threat is apparently no longer a concern.
Did we win? Still very confused, but there's not much doubt the aliens were virtually wiped out.
But most notably, Blake and Jenna are gone.
Where is he? Is he safe?
He reports he's uninjured.
Gareth Thomas left the role of Blake for the Royal Shakespeare Company. Sally Knyvette, Jenna, found the character to be underutilized, which is a common problem for women in science fiction. The character's background as a pilot and smuggler sets up a sort of female Han Solo, and that just didn't come into play much, particularly in Season 2, where more writers were involved and the overall voice of the show became a bit muddled. But looked at from within the story, this is when it starts to get really interesting. The Federation is shattered, but not in the People's Revolution way that Blake had hoped for.
I only hope Blake survived long enough to realize that he was winning both wars.
Blake? You were with Blake?
Blake's band of freedom fighters and their magnificent ship are still out there, but without the front man.
You're right, but then figureheads aren't too difficult to come by. Any idiot can be one.
Of course, a militaristic expansionist state isn't going to just fade away because it took a hit. The remnants of the Federation try to reconstitute. Servalon, now president, ruthlessly molds the shattered pieces into a new Federation, while Avon continues being a thorn in their side with considerably less revolutionary zeal, but a much higher level of snark than Blake brought to the fight. With some new crew members to fill out the gaps, the crew of the Liberator fights on. All through it, there's periodic references to Blake, who is still a symbol of the Resistance. Despite his being gone and the thing he was resisting becoming something quite different, the conflict is still framed in terms from a world that no longer exists, which is often what happens in our world, with present-day conflicts being forced into comparisons with the past. In any geopolitical crisis, every Western leader is equated with either Churchill or Chamberlain, for example. Every foreign enemy is Hitler. Political opponents, even marginally right of center, are smeared as fascists. We frame conflict in terms of the last big fight. The show reflects that back in some ways. Blake is gone. Half the crew has been replaced, and the Federation fell, but it's still Blake's 7 fighting the Federation. The narrative of the past war is force-fit onto the current one. It becomes even more pronounced with Season 4, which is almost a soft reboot. Only Avon and Villa remain of the original crew. The Liberator has been destroyed, and while Servalon is alive and being villainous, she has to operate under a false identity within this reconstituted Federation. Just assume she never gave any public address when she was president. Season 4 especially has some shades of Firefly, and of course its influence on Babylon 5 is well known, and even more to the spin-off show Crusade, but that's a topic for another time. The point being that Blake 7 is a story of reacting to events, of a bunch of people trying to get what they want and working at cross purposes, trying to outguess each other and kind of blundering around getting people killed. Blake had a plan. Avon has plans. Servalon plots and schemes, but rarely do these plans resemble what actually happens. It's episodic. There's no grand narrative until we impose one. A process that involves weighing some episodes more heavily than others, pointing out the turning points, the great moments, the key episodes that allow you to understand the characters and the core themes, skipping a lot of other episodes, things that happened but don't really play into the big shifts much. And then perhaps most believably cutting of all is Blake's return in the final episode. After their base of operations has been compromised, Avon sees the need for a renewed resistance that can take down the Federation permanently. And he knows only one man that it could be built around.
He is strongly identified with rebels, you see, and very popular with rabbles.
So with a destination provided by Orac, they set out to get Blake back. Only a lot of things have happened since we last saw Blake. He's working as a bounty hunter.
I think there were 4 of them tracking me.
There were. And then there was one.
We don't learn much about what happened to bring him to that point, but we do find out that Jenna went back to her smuggler roots and got killed trying to run a blockade.
She tried to run the blockade once too often. Happens to all of them eventually.
Blake is drawing the others in. Big payday catching these fugitives.
He also has several associates with Federation prices, and one of them is particularly valuable.
Ah, but things are not as they appear.
You didn't need to do the bounty hunter routine either.
I said I'd follow you, and I will, until the Federation's finally destroyed.
Blake is still a revolutionary, but he's hardened. He's traded the last of that idealism for brutal pragmatism. He sees that he can't defeat the Federation by winning arguments. He has to win a war. The man he was is gone. He's become someone else, leading a different kind of revolution against a different Federation. And through the whole series, we've been traveling with Avon and Villa. They've been left behind by events. And at the climax, Avon suddenly realizes it. He's staring into the face of a man he recognizes but doesn't know.
Have you betrayed us? Have you betrayed me?
He shoots as much out of shock as anything. But in the end, it is Blake who is betrayed.
Your friend Blake said he couldn't tell anymore who was Federation and who wasn't. He was right. He couldn't.
Federation troops arrive, everyone but Avon is killed, and he stands alone, surrounded by enemies. Bad guys win, good guys die, and gray middle ground guy gets left standing there holding the bag. Yeah, that's how these things usually end up. Revolutions start in a flurry of high-minded idealism, but tend to end in a bloody awful mess. The objectives shift, sometimes subtly and sometimes dramatically. And the last man standing isn't there by virtue or righteousness, but by ruthlessness and luck. The ending of Blake 7 leaves us perplexed, disappointed, maybe a little angry. But it's the ending it needed, because it isn't a Star Wars tale of good versus evil or a Star Trek ode to the triumph of liberalism. Made at a time when the UK seemed trapped in high inflation and unemployment, along with the bigger sense of a declining power, Blake 7 is a darker science fiction, more reflective of where we are than where we want to be. It's neither aspirational like Trek, nor is it pure space opera in the mold of Star Wars or Flash Gordon. If I'm going to compare it to any well-known American science fiction franchise, it would be Battlestar Galactica. A group of people thrown together by chance, all of them having lost everything, set adrift, but they keep going anyway, trying to make the best of each day and opportunity, because what else are they going to do? And maybe that's really the takeaway, in part because it didn't have to end that way, but even more than that, though they meet bad ends, it's still better than staying on the prison planet. When the galaxy is stacked against you, every new day is a victory, and dying in a blaze of glory is better than withering away in a cell. I keep thinking there should be a goofy Australian parody of this show called Seven Blokes.